Hello and welcome to a new episode of Africa Today. The head of Libya's unity government on Tuesday urged Libyans to rally behind the battle in Sirte, as the UN approved an operation saying it is aimed at stopping the flood of weapons into the country. More in the following report.
Libya's pro-government forces are fighting for Sirte. The UN Security Council unanimously authorized a European Union naval mission saying it is to enforce an arms embargo on the country and expand Operation Sophia, which has been combating migrant smuggling. Diplomats hope the move will shore up the UN-backed administration led by Prime Minister-designate Faiz Sarraj. Forces allied with his government of national accord have been fighting since mid-May to take Sirte, 450 kilometers or 280 miles east of the capital Tripoli. Pro-government troops, a mix of militias and army units, have taken control of Sirte's port and airport. But their advance slowed at the end of last week as they reached central and northern parts of the city. According to medical officials, the fighting has left 140 pro-GNA fighters dead and 500 injured. Established in Tripoli more than 2 months ago, Libya's unity government has been struggling to unify violence-ridden Libya and exert its control over the entire North African country. An arms embargo imposed on Libya in 2011 during the uprising against Gaddafi remains in force. The resolution adopted at the UN allows EU vessels to inspect vessels bound to or from Libya, which they have reasonable grounds to believe are carrying arms or related material to or from Libya.
Welcome back, and to know more about the ties between Egypt and Africa, we are joined over the phone by Dr. Sherifat Demirdash, political analyst. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Hi, sir. How are you?
How are you? Your voice is very low. Huh?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little bit better.
Okay. Sir, how do you evaluate the ties between Egypt and Africa?
Well, the African continent is a promising, continent for for the world. I mean, not just for Egypt. If we watch the amount of investments, for instance, the rising amounts of investment, Chinese investment in Africa, and if we recall the late forum in Africa for the relationship between China and Africa, and the prospectus of investment in Africa is attracting all the world. Actually, the relationship, we have historical ties, economic ties even, with Africa. I mean, we had Nasser Export and Import Company, which has had branches and still have branches all over Africa. And these branches, in the time of Nasser, they served as liaison officers or let's say commercial officers for the Egyptian trade with Africa. Actually, our relationship, economic relationship, with Africa is not so big. We are speaking about a number of $4 to $5 billion a year. The exchange, the trade exchange between Egypt and the African continent, it is very limited, and I think personally that the Egyptian export, if they have chances to reach markets, first of all, the African market is the most suitable market for Egyptian exports for two reasons. First, the transportation, the cost, the freight cost, it's much easier even now we can have ground transportation between Egypt and Africa. Now we have our communication with Sudan, and in the near future we can have ground transportation between Egypt and the depth, the heart of the African continent. But still, it's much cheaper to transport our merchandise to Africa. Second, the competition there, we have, favorable conditions for competition. We have many trade agreements with, COMESA, East Africa, all this kind of treaties, commercial treaties between Egypt and the African countries. It gives us a preferential treatment in the customs and many aspects. So our potential is very big in exporting to Africa, and at the same time, Africa is a huge, let's say, source of food and vegetables and meat and cattle to import to Egypt. So the exchange between Egypt and Africa, economic exchange or trade exchange, it should at least reach the figure of, let's say, $10 billion within the next year or a couple of years. And we have to aim a target of at least by the end of the 2020, at least $10 to $15 billion of trade exchange with Africa. This is our close markets. This is our preferential markets. This is our where we have already, we have been there, and we can be there. This is how I see it.
Okay, sir. Of course, Egypt and the African continent has, especially the Nile Basin countries, have one river, the River Nile. How the River Nile played a role in strengthening ties between Egypt and the Nile Basin countries?
Well, the technical cooperation between the Nile Basin countries, it should create a basis of cooperation which will enforce the other aspects of cooperation. This is, unfortunately, the conflicts now between Egypt and Ethiopia, it makes it more difficult for this technical cooperation in the irrigation and water aspects. But Egypt have adopted a policy to maintain its technical ties and cooperation with the Nile Basin countries, even with Ethiopia, although all the disputes and the misunderstandings rising around the Dam of Renaissance and its implications upon the flow of water to Egypt, water share in the Nile. But besides this, technical cooperation between the Nile Basin countries, which is very important. It affects all the aspects of life, because water is, when you speak about water, we speak about irrigation, agriculture, we speak about generating electricity, we speak about industries, we speak about all aspects of economic life. So it's a good base for cooperation. Egypt has its ties, cultural ties also, with Africa long time ago, since the time of the pharaohs. And in a sense, yes, the Nile is a big tie between the countries of the Nile Basin countries, and it should this ties, technical ties, all kind of ties, cooperation, this kind of cooperation should overcome any problems in the future.
Well, Dr. Sharif Demirdash, political analyst, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And the economy of Africa is diverse, consisting of trade, industry, agriculture, and human resources of the continent. Let's know more about this in the following report.
As of 2012, approximately 1.07 billion people were living in 54 different countries in Africa. Africa is a resource-rich continent, but many African people are poor. Recent growth has been due to growth in sales in commodities, services, and manufacturing. Sub-Saharan Africa in particular is expected to reach a GDP of $29 trillion by 2050, but its income inequality will be a major deterrent in wealth distribution. In March 2013, Africa was identified as the world's poorest inhabited continent. However, the World Bank expects that most African countries will reach middle income status, defined as at least $1,000 per person a year by 2025 if current growth rates continue. In 2013, Africa was the world's fastest growing continent at 5.6% a year, and GDP is expected to rise by an average of over 6% a year between 2013 and 2023. Growth has been present throughout the continent, with over one-third of sub-Saharan African countries posting 6% or higher growth rates and another 40% growing between 4% to 6%. Observers say the dawn of the African economic boom, which is in place since 2000, was similar to the Chinese economic boom that had emerged in Asia since the late 1970s.
Welcome back, and to focus more light on the, to shed more light on the close ties between Egypt and Africa, we are joined over the phone by Ambassador Mohammed Higazi, former Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs. Hello, Mr. Ambassador.
Hello, Dina. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Sir, how it is important for Egypt to maintain close ties with Africa?
Well, we are an African nation that we are very proud of. We have just celebrated on the 25th of May, the Africa Day celebration. A lot of African activities are taking place in Egypt. President Sisi have just met yesterday the State Minister for Foreign Affairs of Uganda, where he have submitted an invitation to the President of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, to visit Egypt. And the President himself said that he would like to visit Uganda, a very important African and Nile Basin country. While we're speaking, Ambassador Hamdi Louza, the Deputy Minister for African Affairs, has departed to attend a summit on the Great Lakes region. And, you know, Egypt is fully integrated into this organization. The Great Lakes is an important region where Egypt and the Nile Basin country are stemmed and linked to. We are also participating with our peacekeeping forces in the Congo and in the peace process in Central African Republic, in Burundi. And we have been witnessing Egypt presiding the Security Council for the month of May as representative of Africa. We have followed a lot of African events in Egypt since the beginning of the year. So Africa Egypt ties are flourishing and are witnessing a lot of progress.
Sir, Africa was known for a long time as, this continent was known for it as the food basket for the whole world. It is a virgin continent and has lots of natural resources, but still this country does not develop or does not have improvement. It is still suffering from lack of food, poverty, and lots of problems. Why is that?
Dina, let me differ a little bit on this statement. What is happening in Africa? True, we are facing a lot of problems. I just mentioned the situation in Eastern Congo, the situation or the peace process in Central Africa, the situation of conflict in Somalia, the crisis in Burundi. This is true. But still also in your program or in the entry, in the intro, you have referred to the World Bank estimation that most of African economies will reach a middle income by 2025. And Africa is progressing fast, and they have even put a similarity to the Chinese economic booming on the 70s and 80s. Then Africa is achieving now 5.6. Many economies have flourished and achieving a lot of successes. As you may have followed also in February this year in Sharm el-Sheikh, we hosted Africa 2016 Economic Trade and Investment Conference, where we have witnessed a lot of attention to African economies and the wish to invest in the continent. As you said, Dina, Africa is very rich of its natural resources. It is among the most promising and uprising economies and continents worldwide. You may also know that 15% of the world population are living in Africa, a huge market of 1.1 billion. We may also notice that in terms of natural resources, 12% of the oil produced worldwide are in Africa. 6.5 of the natural gas are also produced in Africa. Add to that all the minerals, platinum, diamonds, gold, cobalt, iron, uranium, name it, and you'll find it in our continent. So we have to be also very proud of the struggle Africa is making on all fronts, and I'm sure that we will reach a safe shore, and Africa will gain its deserved status on the world economic rising markets and continents.
What are the steps that should be taken in order to speed up the Africa's economic cooperation?
Many, Dina. As a matter of fact, partnership with international community is one, but inner house or inner African communication and cooperation is so important. We have in the continent agreed on a very important program, 2063. This is 100 years since the establishment of the Organization of African Unity, and the dream of the founder father that we have celebrated just a few days ago on the 25th of May shows that we have to work together. When I mentioned the Sharm el-Sheikh Africa 2016 for trade and investment, I meant inner African trade, as your previous speaker spoke also about the importance of enhancing frameworks and cooperation, maritime lines. The Egyptian position is very clear that we have to work together, inner African investments, and resort to our own markets and resources. And I have to mention also that one of the aim of the 2063 plan for Africa is to enhance, beside what we have from the natural wealth, to enhance the capacity building. Our population are very much in need to being taken care of. We need, besides the mineral revolution and the mineral exploitation, to exploit our wealth in capacities and in workers and human beings that are well-educated. Labor force in Africa is one of the wealth of the continent that we have to work with and to develop them to be able to meet the demand of the markets and to exploit for themselves the wealth of the continent. It is there for us to use. It is for our partners, as you may have mentioned, China, India, carry a very important initiative to our continent, Europe as a traditional partner, the United States, all over the world are in the continent, and we are keen in Egypt to be part of the drive towards our continent, the drive towards a better economy and a better future. We are capable, we have our institutions, and we have our labor force, we have our wealth. So if we possess all this, Dina, why can't we move ahead? We will, and we are heading also for cooperation and integrative approach between the blocks. We have hosted in Sharm el-Sheikh on June 2015 the 3 blocks meeting. I meant the COMESA, East Africa, and the SADC in the south. This is the trend for one Africa. So we consolidate our power, we know our wealth, we know our strength, we have to trust the future, and we have to face our challenges and problems.
Well, Ambassador Mohammed Hagazi, former Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs, thank you very much for joining us and welcome to our show. And by this, we come to the end of our Africa Today. I'm Dina Mamdouh. Thank you for watching.